Hello and welcome to episode 2 of PrimetimeUGC. I'm Rug Enterprise and with me is my co-host Captain P.F. Dennis. We have a great show for you this time around and we're trying out a few new things.
That's right. We'd like to hear from you, the viewers, about what you'd like to see here on Primetime. As this is a show for authors, we want to make sure we're addressing all your concerns and spreading the word about your missions. So you could say that this show just might be in a constant state of substantive flux.
Oh geez. We will always keep our core features though. Tonight we've got our author interview with Bazag, a look at his mission Enemies of the Empire, and the feature request segment. I'll also be running down the latest news pertaining to user-generated content.
And a bit later we'll dig into our mailbag and go through the STO forum post for the list of missions that were submitted. Honestly, that mailbag is a handy feature. It allows the UGC community to give us their feedback and input. It's a valuable resource of which we hope you'll take full advantage.
That's true, Cap. While we are in the Starbase UGC chat room, new authors are always welcome to drop in and give us technical questions about the Foundry. So we're going to be trying out a new segment covering various tips and tricks that our authors have invented or learned. If there's a particular topic you'd like to see covered, drop us a line at mailbag@primetimeugc.com.
What I'll also do is to post that segment on the primetimeugc.com tutorials page once the show airs, so authors can play it back as much as they like. For now, however, we're doing the show. First up will be Rogue's edition of the news. You're watching Primetime UGC.
Let's take a look at the latest Foundry news. The topic that's on everyone's mind now is the arrival of free-to-play, and how that's going to be affecting the Foundry. The first effect is pretty obvious. The number of players overall on UGC missions is going up by a large degree. On the surface, this means a lot of players are trying the Foundry and are liking user-generated missions, and that's definitely a good thing. As expected, a lot of these players are on missions with low-level requirements, so missions like Alamac 30's The Spirit of Ramak Nor, and my mission, First Cause and Effect, are getting tremendous amount of plays, while other offerings with higher level requirements haven't quite caught on as much as people might hope. We're going to be keeping a close eye on this to see if missions with higher level requirements will be catching on as well as the others. One issue factoring into the free-to-play mission play pattern is one of my personal pet peeves, the current UI for mission browsing, which is still the same as it was in pre-free-to-play. That is, the UI gives heavy favor to missions that have high ratings, and those that are bumped past the initial 30 or so top-rated missions hardly get much consideration. I won't go too much into this for fear of making it its own Feature Request of the Week segment, but this is an issue that's getting magnified with the start of free-to-play. Moving on to a different topic, new features with the Foundry. A new feature just released is the tip jar option. First seen last week in the patch notes for the triple test server and then implemented on the live server on January 26th. Functionally, the way this works is that after playing a mission, players are able to tip dilithium to the authors, with up to 3 tips given per day. The tippable amount of dilithium is either 25, 50, or 100 dilithium, given as a thank you for the experience, in addition to giving the mission a star rating. There's been some question as to the amount of the tip being insufficient, but as this is a new feature, we're sure that the devs will be tuning this as needed. We'll be keeping close tabs on this to see how the community reaction pans out, but we're definitely excited to see this feature make it to the live servers. That about wraps up Foundry news, and now it's time for another look at Foundry bugs. I've got a new list of bugs to check out for this week. As I mentioned in the last episode, with a large number of players trying out the Foundry for the first time, these are important things to keep an eye out for and hopefully are on the list of things to fix. First issue is Space NPC Wander. As you might already know, ground NPCs can be set to wander, but the actual wander pathing isn't generated until after the mission is published. Space NPC Wander is available in the UI, but it doesn't seem to be functioning at all. And that's it, pretty straightforward. Space Wander would help give enemy NPCs a more organic feel, and we would like to see it fixed. Next up is the issue of some ground idle animations being non-functional. Some of the animations continue to be selectable in the editor UI, but are either terribly implemented or completely inoperable on both map previewing and after the publishing process. Most authors will figure this out when testing a map, but it ultimately boils down to being a polish issue. If they're not working or not correctly implemented in the editor, they shouldn't appear. It could be a time-consuming process to figure out which ones work and which ones don't, and using the editor is already pretty time-consuming. We know that authors would appreciate having that ironed out. And lastly, we have the issue of demo record still not recording custom NPCs. And yes, I know it's a repeat from last episode, but we need this feature working. Speaking from a show production standpoint, it really handicaps us, and is becoming my co-host's personal greatest pet peeve. For his sanity, please get that taken care of. And that about wraps up this week's bugs. If you have a bug that's grating on you that you'd like to have mentioned on our show, please send it to us at mailbag@PrimetimeUGC.com, and we'll be sure to give it some airtime. Switching gears now, let's take a look at this episode's feature request of the week. We're going to bend the rules a little bit this time and allow for 2 requests, given to us by 2 viewers of the show. XR377 has noted that Star Trek plots in general have a long-standing history with clones, duplicates, mirror images, and so on. So he requests the ability to reskin mobs with the player, his ship, or his bridge officers. We can see the merit in this suggestion. Shameless self-promotion aside, executing this in my own mission, Own Worst Enemy, is a tremendous logistical hassle, and trying to get it to work well is equally difficult. It would open up a whole new area of the Foundry to explore, and we support its implementation fully. Next up, we have a suggestion from Admiral Murphy, who is requesting expansion of the character editor inside the Foundry. Not just more costume pieces, but the inclusion of additional races such as Cardassians, Remans, and more, and the ability to mix and match pieces together to make NPCs with entirely new custom looks. We have to agree with this suggestion. In the true spirit of the Vulcan Idic, we think that more Foundry NPC components should be combinable into as many iterations as possible. More is better. Have the limitation be the author's imagination instead of the costume editor. And that about wraps up our feature requests of the week. If you have a suggestion for a feature you want included in the Foundry, send it to us at mailbag@PrimetimeUGC.com.
Since the last episode of our show, Star Trek Online has gone free to play. There are many new players who are looking to play the content that the community of Foundry authors has developed. There is a problem, in as much as these missions are somewhat difficult to find, and once they are found, only the top few in the list are ever played. Missions that are not as fortunate are continually passed over, because they take too much digging to find. Unless the player goes looking for a particular author's mission, odds are he or she will not find it. It would be one thing to say, well, the higher rated missions are on the top of the list. That both is and is not true. There are many missions of a similar rating that are too far down that list to be bothered by most players, so the mission is not played, word is not spread, and a jewel can easily be buried beneath so much sand. There are so many great missions out there, by so many great authors, that are rarely played because they simply have no exposure to the average player. There needs to be a serious revamp of the system for the benefit of all involved. There is this new tip jar system on the Troll server that will end up rewarding the same few authors over and over and over again. Whilst they very well may deserve it, there are many authors just as deserving who, well, they'll never get a whiff of dilithium as a result. There must be a better way to showcase user-generated content. Maybe these missions can be sorted by type, faction, duration, or difficulty. The only listing we have at present is a list according to a flawed rating system. This is a system that is unforgiving. Someone's mission can receive a 3-star rating, even when the player loved it, because the player did not understand how to give the star rating. Another mission gets a 1-star review because the captain fell through the floor upon beaming in. That is beyond an author's control. Yet that mission suffers the 1-star stigma, because there is no way to have these bogus reviews removed from their records. There has got to be a way to even the playing field. Let's face it, there may be bad missions out there as much as there are great ones. Well, there are bad missions out there. but each and every one of them deserves an equal shot at being played. After that, then the player base can decide what they like and don't like. As it stands, the players only know what is being fed to them, and have no idea if there might be something more palatable 100 missions down that list. This is not an argument to spread the wealth, it's an argument to spread the word. I'm Cerberus Films, and this is Primetime UGC.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Doctor, I would speak with you regarding some discomfort I'm having. Sure, Sulek. What seems to be the trouble? In private, if you don't mind, Doctor. Don't worry about Nurse Borden, son. She's busy with her duties. That patient on the bed there went into cardiac arrest a few minutes ago. Now what's troubling you? Come on, out with it. I'm a doctor. There's nothing I haven't heard. Well, I've been on this mission, out in deep space for 6 years now. It was about a year before I got the assignment
Say
that
no more, son. I've got just the thing. Medical science has advanced to the point where we've almost licked the common cold. Blood fever? No problem. Not anymore. Now there's Vulcaden, Ponfar Reliever. It magically erases all symptoms associated with the Vulcan mating ritual. I have tried medications before, Doctor, but you've never tried Vulcaden. Just take 2 of these and you'll be right as rain. You are right, Doctor. I feel 98.35% better already. Ask your doctor about Vulcaden. There's no need to fear Ponfar. Side effects may include weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, ear pain, stomach upset, diarrhea, incontinence, flatulism, irritation of the inner eyelid, round ears, and priapism. A mind meld lasting more than 4 hours. If you experience any of these, call your doctor immediately. Patients with an allergy to plomeek root should not take Vulcaden. For this episode of Primetime UGC, we decided to stick close to home at Starbase UGC and profile one of our own. He's the man who brought you everyone's favorite space poo. We're taking a stab at a conversation with Bazag. You have Memory Lane, Starfleet Experimentation, Hidden Intelligence, Mysteries of Ponfar, Enemies of the Empire, and More Than Just Missing.
Yep, that's right. 6 missions.
Okay, so you have 6 to your credit, and that's 5 Fed missions and 1 Klingon mission. So is it fair to say that you prefer telling Fed stories from a hero perspective rather than the warrior perspective?
I suppose it's just what I understand more from my experience in Star Trek. I just have a very, I suppose, a limited exposure to what it is to be a Klingon. To be a hero Klingon than it is to be a hero Starfleet captain.
Right, because there wasn't a Star Trek show about Klingons specifically.
But I think I did quite a good job with Enemies of the Empire, which is my KDS mission. Bringing in the warrior aspect, but also other known aspects of their society. Like honor and the overseer of and just try and bring a few things together in that one mission.
Yeah, I thought it was great. So that the Herodian battles were really challenging. Great stuff in there.
Well, I did try, and there's a few technical things that I tried just to make. In the last map, I've got a force field that drops down, and I tried around fiddling with doing a makeshift timer. But that didn't quite work, so I just decided to change it up and just have Herodian groups beam in one after the other, and when you finish killing them, then the force field will automatically drop.
Yeah.
So I just decided that instead of trying to do an actual time.
Right. It's hard to pull off. You got to balance the groups out so that they kill one another in time, consistently. It has to work the same way every time.
Yeah, because I've had tries that took 2 minutes, and I did a time test and it took 2 minutes, and one another took 6 minutes. So,
Right. It's too much of a variable there.
mm.
All right. Now, all these missions, with the exception of Starfleet Experimentation and Hidden Intelligence, are standalones. Did you ever want to do complete series like a lot of authors do, like 3, 4, 5 missions?
I don't think I will ever do a full um, story, full arc where you basically start off from the first one and just continue on one long story. But with I'm planning on new missions that will incorporate uh, bits of story from my previous missions. Like, for example, I've got a story that I'm working on that I haven't actually started actually working on in the Foundry, but it's going around in my mind about drawing a race that I created back in Starfleet Experimentation, and incorporating that with the an alternate universe that I created for my Jem'Hadar mission, More Than Just Missing,
Right.
and incorporating those two elements together and form a new mission, as well as other things like telling the story of what happens to the Overseer in Enemies of the Empire, and I think I do want to do another Bob mission too.
Yeah.
Although I haven't worked out exactly what I want to do with him yet.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That was going to be my next question. Was, say a few words about space poo. But and if we were ever going to see Bob again. But you answered it already. So
Yeah, I would love to have him as a influential part of solving a mission, but I need to work out the basic plot of it first. So there's just too many ideas going around to pin anything down.
all right, now here's a construction question. Now, how much planning do you do before authoring a mission? Is it outlined, or you do maps first, or story first?
Well, the way I construct a map, I start with a basic premise that what I want, how I want the story to go. For example, I knew that I wanted to start as with Mysteries of Ponfar. I knew that I wanted that to be you start in a prison pretty much, and that you have to escape that prison.
Right.
And then from there, I just drew story, sort of created the maps and the story alongside each other. So as I created the map, I do the story objectives along with it, and then go on to the next map, and so it's per map, but include the story objectives for each map as I go along.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to get off the missions for a second and just ask, so far, which of the Trek series has influenced you the most?
In terms of my Foundry writing, I'd have to say DS9. Both Memory Lane and my Jem'Hadar mission, of course, More Than Just Missing, heavily, I'm heavily influenced. That was my first real exposure to Star Trek, beyond, the movies that I saw growing up, as a TV series. But also, I think there's a bit of TOS and TNG in there as well.
Sure. Well, you just finished TNG and you're working on Voyager now, right?
Yeah, so
yeah.
I've been doing TNG watch through, and doing a Voyager just started a Voyager watch through as well. So people who are on the Starbase UGC chat or in on GeekShed server, yes, would see my nickname change.
Yes, I see it all the time. Here's a question I think I'm going to start asking every author that we have on, and that's, who do you write the missions for? I mean, do you look at the missions that are out there already and say, well, gee, I have to have some combat here because that's what's popular, or I have to have, so much story or not too much story because people don't like it? Or do you just kind of wing it, just do what you want to see?
Well, I pretty much wing it. That's probably not the best plan, but that's what I do. As I go along, I do test out my missions and see how they go, and say it. With sometimes with Starfleet experimentation, hidden intelligence, there's absolutely no combat at all. Whereas with enemies of the Empire, it's quite combat heavy.
Yeah.
And so it just determines what out for the story. That just how exactly where I balance story and combat and other elements like puzzles that I want to put in.
Well, that about wraps it up. I think that's all I have. I'd like to thank you, Baz, for coming on today. I hope you join us again soon. Right now, we're going to leave you with a look at one of Baz's more recent missions, Enemies of the Empire. This time around, I'll be reviewing Enemies of the Empire by Bazag. This is the first Klingon mission that has been reviewed on PrimetimeUGC, as we rarely come across any new ones. So let's get going with the story. This mission begins in the Sanic system in the Bemoth sector, where there is a Klingon colony that has come under attack. Upon entering the system, you find several Federation ships in various states of destruction. At first you believe that Starfleet was responsible for the attack, but the truth unravels after you beam down to the planet and begin your investigation. Your first stop is the colony overseer, who sheds some light on the events of the attack. You soon learn the true identity of the attackers and set out to make them pay. Anyone wishing not to hear spoilers, please cover your ears and run frantically from your computer. Okay. You follow the evidence until the Herodian turn out to be your villains, and you are determined to wipe away any traces of them from the Klingon territory. This plot and subsequent dialogue are well matched and fairly straightforward. It took me about an hour to get through it and never felt bludgeoned by walls of text. The mission objectives were clear and the characters had depth. My one complaint is that I wish I had found out what became of the colony overseer, who accepted the Federation's assistance. I gave story 4.5 out of 5 stars. Map design. I have to say that I was impressed by the choices of maps and the customizing done to several of them. The first ground map is stunning, especially with a good graphics card. Space maps were well done, and it's good to see authors using asteroids in their maps for a change. We haven't seen too much of that. It's a personal note. I happen to like asteroids. The Herodian base map was very well done and almost completely a custom job. The low ceilings gave the ensuing fight for survival a more cramped and urgent feel. I would have had more time to sightsee if it were not for the multitude of hunters bothering me. I gave map design 5 stars. On to tech. Apart from a fancy drop out of warp, there were not too many homegrown effects in this mission. Most of them were out of the Foundry preset lineup. However, since the mission could not have improved from extra bells and whistles, this does not detract from my rating. Every effect had its purpose and performed perfectly. I gave tech 4 out of 5 stars. Now last, but most definitely not least, difficulty. Everything seemed a bit simple for a while until the Herodian made their appearance in a big way. The first interior map had all manner of hunters. From the initiate to the betas, every rank was represented by the dozens. If you like a challenge and almost non-stop action, this map supplies it. Space Battle provided that same feel, starting with swarms of small vessels and leading up to a battleship. Then it's back to the final epic showdown. Picture beaming down into a small room that you cannot leave, having one mob after another beaming in as fast as you've killed the first, until the floor is literally covered in Herodian corpses and occasionally your own. That's the first room of the map. Just have a few hyposprays handy for when you face the Alpha. Did I mention it was a blast to get through? I gave difficulty 5 out of 5. I leave you now with the bite-sized breakdown and a positive recommendation for Enemies of the Empire by Bazag. Support the Foundry and its authors by playing this mission for yourself. This had been episode 11 of Bite Size UGC. Okay, here we are with Foundry Essentials, a quick demonstration of the most basic steps in mission creation in Foundry. If you've been making missions for a while, this seems second nature, but thinking back on it, I was as lost as most of the new players are when it comes to some of the simplest steps to constructing a mission. First and foremost is the dreaded map transition. Let's see if I can simplify a bit. First, you must begin in the map screen. You must have an objective of some kind on the target map before you can create a transition from your source map. For instance, I've made map 1 and I'm dropping on a place marker as my objective. Okay, I'm going to enlarge the radius of the place marker so that it's easy to trip by a passing spacecraft. Now, the choice of where to start will not present itself until you've dropped your first objective into the storyline. I say line because Foundry is linear. You cannot do branching missions as of yet. There is no way to have multiple endings. You may have multiple choices on the way to the same ending, but that's for a future discussion. Once in the story screen, we want to place a marker in from the library section on the right. In the story screen, it reads Reach Marker. That's because it refers to the action. In the map screen, you place the marker. In the story screen, you provide the action that takes place once the marker is reached. Now that we have a marker on the storyline, we must fill in the mission text. These always have to be filled in or the mission will not publish. This is the text that will be visible on the right while playing the mission. It's used to indicate the objective to the player, turning green once completed. Okay, now where's the transition? Well, we have a couple of things to look at first. After the mission text is the waypoint setting. Automatic indicates that a large circle will be displayed on the player's map around this objective. If set to none, the circle will not appear. Underneath the divider line, we have the marker identifier. The small button on the right with the 3 dots is where you choose which marker you want at this point in your story. Project map will automatically be populated once the marker is chosen. Reach text is the text that will show in the center of the player's screen once the marker is triggered by the player's ship or captain. It is optional. You do not need to fill in to publish. Back to the little button with the 3 dots. Hitting the button opens a selection screen that will list all the maps available to you, including your own custom maps. To choose the destination and create a transition, pick the marker from map 1. Voila! Map transition. Now we've got our map transition dialog box and a few of those little dotted buttons again. I'll take it from the top. Earth Space Dock is the default and can be changed by hitting the Leave From button. You can change to wherever you like in the known galaxy or where Cryptic lets you, but the choices are many. We're sticking with an entry door at ESD. Next is Costume. That's self-explanatory. Whoever you want to talk goes into that window. Style is the emotion you want your character to display. Text is what he or she is going to say. And the button is the player response that triggers the map change. Below the divider line is the location of your spawn point on map 1. That can be changed if you have multiple spawn points, but that's hardly ever the case. And finally, Map Mission, which will be the heading on the right that remains over the map's entire list of objectives from the mission text fields of those boxes when added to the storyline. Observe while I make the choices. Now, when you're finished making all your choices, you can playtest your mission to see if everything came out right and possibly if Hirogen make a decent chicken soup. That is really all there is to it, but seeing it done is no substitute for the hands-on approach. So get in there and bring your stories to life. I know I'm looking forward to playing. This has been Foundry Essentials. If there's a technique you'd like to see demonstrated, drop us a line in the mailbag. That's mailbag@PrimetimeUGC.com. And now it's time for Published in Primetime, our weekly rundown of all the missions you submitted to our mailbag this week. And here they are. First up, Admiral Murphy's got a new series, Breaking the Mirror. It's a 5-part series taking place around DS-11 and the Antonidia system. Prevent an invasion of the Terran Empire. The story takes place after his last series, Jem'Hadar Alliance, but this new series can be played independently of its predecessor. Let's not forget Ceridum, with his 2 KDF classics, a Klingon Honor Carol and the Fires of Prometheus. Even though the holidays are over, don't wait for next December to play the Honor Carol. And the rest of this week's missions are on the Fed side. Captain of Q by Utralic, Alliance Series 2 of 6 by Altair 145, Not Our War by Zandi, Overture 5, the Klingon Coda by Kinetic Impulsor, and Alexandria Incident by Gingy. Support the Foundry by playing these missions yourself. And that's going to do it for this episode's Published in Primetime. Join us again on February 13th for the next episode. But in the meantime, submit your missions to mailbag@PrimetimeUGC.com and we'll read them out on the air.